baby, rolling. Hey, everybody. Oh, yeah. 1, 2. Huh?
Baby, do the hand thing.
Baby, do the hand thing. 1, 2, 3. Hey, everybody. We are here, and we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings, but I don't want to because I just watched the new episode of Mandalorian, and it was wild. It was crazy. It was off the hook.
Off the chain, you might say.
Oh.
Off the chain code.
Oh, my God.
Oh. You see what I did there?
I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, we've been sitting here for like 45 minutes just in awe. What was that, episode 6?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we got 2 left before the season's over.
Man.
The tragedy. Wasn't that what it was called?
There was one point where you could hear, or at different points, you could hear me and Tanner on different levels of the house going,
John just kept yelling, now this is pod racing.
Oh.
Intermittently every 5 minutes.
Yeah. That was...
Dude, when Slave 1 comes around that corner, I was going to say,
yeah,
been calling it. Well, yeah, but this isn't going to come out for a week.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
oh, okay. So if
This
you
is
haven't seen it by
next
this point, it's your own fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are going to be seeing us talk about hip-hop and country music this week, probably today.
Yeah. Whoa, you're talking from the past. So actually from the future right now.
I know.
It's time travel.
Whoa, we're from the future.
Okay, so let's go back to this.
Time travel doesn't exist in Star Wars. Well, we said that's kind of...
Whoa.
Neither does the internet.
Well, they do have the HoloNet.
Nobody ever uses it. Must be dial-up. Nobody ever knows anything.
It's in all the books.
I'm like, would
Legends.
you just look it up on Wikipedia, please? I know what's going on in your universe better than you.
Oh, okay. We just have to have a little recap here.
Mhm.
So, go back to Slave 1, though.
Yes. Dude, I had it.
Just tell me about
I was like, I know there's going to be this one moment now that they're off Tatooine where Slave 1's just going to boop and just be there. So dope when it came in.
it. Yeah. I got to say, I love the way they have been, like in episode 5 when Ahsoka just like walks on screen.
Yeah.
There's no setup. It's just, it's there.
Yeah, everything's
She's there.
got these jump reactions and like, oh.
Yeah. It's like, oh, a ship's coming. Oh God, it's Slave 1. It's like,
Yeah.
of course we knew that more than Mandalorian because Din doesn't have Wikipedia.
Yeah. I liked seeing it get to do the conversion as it landed too. That was cool. It was really nice and fluid.
Oh yes. It worked a lot better than my Lego Slave 1 did. The wings on that thing like just kind of rocked back and forth. No, they were too loose actually.
Oh.
Like they wouldn't ever stay. You would hold it upright and they would be fine, and then you'd move it to land.
Yeah.
And they would adjust. But if you just did if you did a back and forth movement real quick, it was.
Did you say that was a slave? Did you have Boba's or Jango's?
I had Boba's.
I had Jango's, and I specifically remember putting it together, and it just disintegrated. Like it would not.
John, you're getting a.
What is all that?
Do you have somewhere you need to be right now?
No, I'm dealing with other things.
Would you like to share with the class?
No, sir.
Remember how Slave 1 is green and red because of Hondo? Yeah. So every time I think about that, like I'm thinking about the 2 colors too. It's so now that Jango has been made a foundling, which is super cool.
Yeah, recanonized, right?
Recanonized. It'll be interesting. Maybe we might finally get a on-screen backstory of the Slave 1, which would be kind of nice, if we see that transfer of that happen. I still think...
I'm waiting on Hondo to come back, man.
I do. I still think Boba is probably going to die either in next season or the end of this one. I think now they've recanoed him as Mando. Mm-hmm. He's not a bitch anymore. He's going to get to be an ultra badass, and he's going to sacrifice... And I think the destroying of the Razor Crest, if anything, was the moment you're like, Boba's going to die.
Yeah, and then he's
agreed,
and then Din's gonna get the ship.
Yeah.
Can I tell you though how worried I was because the episode was called "The Tragedy," when he was flying up, and you see Bobo's looking at the ship and he's like, "The Empire's back," and I was like, he's about to get blown out of the sky. Oh my God.
And I just say, from an audiophile's point of view, that when Boba is flying up towards the Akutan's class cruiser there, that the sound of his ship, it was like, took me back to episode 2 in theaters.
So
right,
cool.
right before the seismic charges.
So dope.
And then you said, we won't be seeing him again.
I am kind of surprised they didn't like take fire on him or something. It was almost like they didn't notice he was there.
Seeing him again. Sorry. Yeah, he did like just fly right up and then scoot by, and they were just like, "That's cool."
Jango is so strong he can bend Beskar.
Yeah, whoa. I feel like Slave One has always had some weird like not being able to be sensed stuff going on.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah,
maybe he just like was, off the scopes or whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like the way it turns. Maybe it doesn't get hit by, who knows? Like. Maybe part of the fact that it like rotates keeps it from like being picked up on some sort of radar or something. I don't know. Who knows? You know anything about that? Does that sound familiar?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just fact checking myself. But
is it the Akutan?
It is. Yeah.
Wow.
Do you know why? Is there any written reason that the Slave One like reorients as it's flying and as it's landing?
I think I remember something about it just being like for the space inside, somehow it made more sense for it to, I don't know, like it was laid out nicer one direction or the other. I don't know. It wasn't. Why are you asking? It's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I feel like I've seen him talk about it like in combat.
Oh yeah.
You like basically you're up and now the whole ship is below you, but all your guns are there too. So you're just kind of like this little pivoty. It's not like it's almost like it becomes like a little mech for you rather than like a car.
Whoa.
So, not to change the subject, but Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
So, Lord of the Rings.
Did you see there's been some new articles about the cast.
Do tell.
Some of the people from Dune are in it. I was actually gonna. Did you see too that HBO Go is gonna get Dune like day one when it's released, like in theaters? You can be able to watch it at home.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know though. I will drive 6 hours to watch that in theaters if I have to.
But I guess you could go watch it in theaters and then when you get home, watch it again.
You guys are coming over and I'm going to just like talk all the backstory on, now that guy's knife.
I'd love to see it in theaters too.
Dude. Yeah. I know that they However, did you also see the part where they pushed it back to like the fall of 21?
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's
So Jason Momoa will be at the premiere with like a 3-foot beard again.
Oh wow! So before we get too much into the movies, what do you know about the Lord of the Rings show? Have you read anything about that recently?
I distinctly remember being in Carl Sandburg Community College when I first heard about this.
It's been out like the rumors have been around forever.
Yeah, so I actually have stopped following it at some point because the information is so few, it's just so spread out and, conflicting. So I was like, I'll just wait until something firms up and we'll see what happens.
This was probably a year ago now, they released like the Twitter page or something for that show, put a map of Middle Earth on, and it was during the Second Age, like some of the locations.
Really?
So that was one of the things where people were like, are they telling us that it's going to be in the Second Age?
That'd be really cool.
There was, but yeah, they're talking about confirmed cast, and I saw somebody talking about the budget not that long ago, because they were talking about it having to like comparing it to Mando actually, because Mando I think is between like 10 and 15 million an episode. Wow. And they were saying that first season of Lord of the Rings was going to be at least $100,000 or $100 million, like $100 million. It sounds weird to even say that, but
1 million billion.
Yeah, which is really not that much if you're talking about like 10 to 15 million an episode.
Yeah.
Does the Fellowship of the Ring, the budget for that one was 93 million for that movie?
Wow. So. Well, like maybe the whole moving to streaming thing is going to be kind of a silver lining of like shows are just going to be really good.
I mean, if they're well funded, that's going to allow people to put what they can into it.
Yeah, if you put a good person at the helm, really check your shit out before you start making it.
Yeah, I think I've always been on the publican side as far as like, hey, they're gonna put out Phantom Menace, I'll be there. That's fine. I'll they're gonna put out the new Disney movies, that's fine, I'll be there, I'm gonna enjoy them. I'll admit I'm starting to get a little nervous from a Lord of the Rings fan side, because like I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but my wife and I decorated our wedding off of Bilbo's birthday party. Yeah, so
I was Gandalf.
You were.
Actually, I was more of a Took, because I lit that big firework off.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
And then I literally slipped in the grass as I was running away and fell on my face going up the hill.
Yeah.
I was literally like Merry and Pippin. I just read here that
Heart and Mordor. You were just knocking.
This website here, The Independent, I don't know what that is, but it is saying that the Amazon series Lord of the Rings will have a $1 billion budget.
Oh, wow.
We are putting our money in the right places.
Yeah. I just hope they don't, it's like, you would think in today's world you couldn't put something out that wasn't great if you have the money. But then you see like Disney decides to do their new trilogy and not write it when they start filming. And you're just like, dude, it's like going into the studio and not writing the album before you start recording it or something. And you're just like, when has that ever worked? Like
Motorhead.
I take back everything I said.
Well, I will say, I just listened to a podcast, talking about Motorhead. And that was one thing with that. That's how they did it, right? They would just get in with they'd have a few riffs. They'd get in the studio, they'd start writing stuff, let me pop off, write, okay. But they really ran into that situation where they were very dependent on the producer. So Ace of Spades happened to work out really, really well. Iron Fist didn't. So it was it was more of a gamble.
Yeah.
If you catch my meaning.
Yeah. I wonder if like as things went on, like say if you look at Bastards or something, like how could you even walk in a room? Like how could Lemmy walk in a room with a producer and the producer expect to tell him what to do? Like if I was the producer, I'd just be like, and Lemmy's like, what do you think of that? You're like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you think I should do next? You're like, what? You're asking me?
Well, so I borrowed your book, that album by album.
Oh yeah.
That was really good, and it was really interesting because that would be a huge problem. Is they'd get in a room with somebody, and the producer would just be like, yeah, sure, cool, all right, and it wouldn't be that good because like where the band was coming from. When they did, I think it was Bastards. Actually, they were talking about the producer. That last producer they worked with, like on all the like last albums. Actually, like Lemmy liked him and respected him enough to listen, and he was willing to stand up to him. Yeah. And so like Mickey D got up and like wrote, or, like played a drum track. Like for like Death or Glory, and he's like, cool, done. And the producer's like, no, you got to do that again. That's not, and actually like whipped them a little bit. Yeah. And it was
cool.
That I'm sorry. So we went from Lord of the Rings to Amazon.
We've been bouncing around the show. So, but let's get back to, the main topic, Michael, that we were going to talk about. I didn't know. I woke up and it was a surprise to me. Just kidding.
Tanner is a surprise last minute guest.
So where do you want to start with Lord of the Rings, Michael?
Well, where I'd like to get is World War II.
Okay.
But I feel like we have some prep work to do before we get there. Also, this mic is...
Maybe you could tell us about Tolkien writing it in the world that he was living in as it was being written first. Maybe a good place to start.
Yes. So the Tolkien fought in World War I, along with C.S. Lewis, actually.
Cool.
Not together, but they were both in the war. So that comparison is made fairly frequently as far as...
were they the same country? Were they?
Yeah, they're both English.
Okay.
So Tolkien was born in South Africa, but at the time that was like a province. I don't know how the colonialism thing works for, being American. We're on the other end of this, so I'm sure British people have a better understanding of the relationship to South Africa at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So Tolkien finished his degree, got married.
Was it in some sort of literature or writing?
Yes, he started in classics, went into comparative literature. Also, fun fact, I actually learned this last night. But him and his wife have Beren and Luthien written on their gravestone.
Okay.
And that's a story from the Silmarillion, where he's a male human.
Mm-hmm.
She's an elf, and she chooses him over immortality.
Mm.
And that's what Aragorn and holy shit,
the Arwen.
Arwen, thank you, man.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was seeing Liv Tyler's face, but Eowyn was the only thing I could think of.
I was just thinking about that scene where she's standing on the moonlight.
But anyway, so
I'd boob.
So Beren and
Luthien. So Aragorn, I believe in the books, he actually sings part of the Lay of Luthien. So they are aware that there's this other couple that's kind of went through the same thing previously. So, okay, back to Tolkien. So he finished his degree. He gets married. They had met like quite earlier before. She was not Catholic. He was Catholic.
Okay.
And in England, that, I mean, it's like a real big deal in Ireland, but like England, it's still not easy to do.
Yeah.
So, one of them was told you can't see the other one until, or I think it was him, whoever he was living with, because his mother died fairly early. His father died very early. And told him, don't see her until you're 21. And he did. So the day he turned 21, he wrote her a letter and said, marry me.
Wow.
She broke off her other engagement.
Wow.
And married him.
Dude.
And knowing that he was going to go to the war.
Wow.
And so basically they were married for a couple of months. He was going to go to the war, like almost certain death. He had, and I don't remember the British denominations of like battalions and
Mention the wall.
I did once, but I think I got away with it. Faulty Towers is a great show in case you haven't seen it. So he went in, and there was his group of 800 guys went into the Somme. 600 of them died. And there was a particular battle where it was just really brutal for them. And he didn't make it to that battle because he got trench fever. And so he was just like sitting in the hospital with a fever.
What is trench fever now?
I think it's just what you get when you like stand in feces and rats and water for like, months, and you just live in it.
Kind of reminds me of the guys were getting in Vietnam where their feet were wet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
For like forever. So they just started having like weird like piss in the bed and like,
whoa. Yeah,
that was a big Vietnam thing, keeping your feet dry so you didn't start just like weirdly pissing the bed.
Well, I mean, and that's a big deal because I know smell was a big, like they would track people with that in Vietnam. I think there was actually like some special forces guys would go in and they would not eat, and or if they would, they'd have like protein bars, but then they would take some sort of pill to constipate them so that they wouldn't ever find, because when you're living out in the jungle and you run into a pile of poop, you can actually smell the difference between American and Viet Cong.
Sure.
It's like they both smell bad, but if you can.
Yeah, but they're eating totally different things.
Well, exactly. Yeah. One's protein bars and MREs, and one's like actually probably healthy.
Yeah. Spices and like cooked food and maybe. I mean, I don't know how they're eating, but so that gets you back to him being in the trenches then, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so he had worked on languages. He had kind of made some languages. He gets trench fever, and he's just sitting in bed. Mm-hmm. So he's in bed for quite a while. He starts writing the Silmarillion, basically, writing down some of these tales.
So that's written first.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're kind of fleshed out. And then he gets back to England, and he's telling the story to his kids about this hobbit that runs around and does, fights dragons and all this stuff. One of his kids' friends hears it. His kid's friend, it gets back to a publisher. They publish the book. It's huge success.
This is the Silmarillion? The huge success?
The Hobbit.
The
Hobbit.
Okay.
The Silmarillion doesn't come out till quite a bit later.
Okay.
I don't believe the 70s, actually. John, can you get a date on the published date of The Fellowship of the Ring? Also
1992.
No, but I think The Hobbit's like in the 30s.
Okay.
And The Fellowship's not till like the 50s.
Oh.
So it's 17 years, I believe.
1954, June 29th.
For some reason, I thought of it as earlier than that. I don't know why.
And what's the Silmarillion? Also, Shilb Antiquarium here in town has a first edition copy of the Silmarillion.
Whoa.
It's only $400. So if you and John wanted to...
Kind of surprised it's not more.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you and John wanted to go in on a Christmas present...
What would you do with it even?
I'm just saying.
Would you look at it? Would you open it?
I would never look at it. I would never deign to soil it with my eyes. So the Lord of the Rings comes out, and it is...
And The Hobbit had already been really successful.
Yes. So there are elements of World War One. I think one that's commonly pointed to is the marshes, the dead marshes, where there's just this plain of rot and dead people, and it's like permanently ruined, and that's what he would have seen in the trenches.
Do you think the sort of growth from Hobbit to Fellowship of the Ring was a choice because he wanted the Hobbit to be accessible for kids, and then Lord of the Rings was for adults, kind of like creating, that was like those kids grew up and now they get this adult story? Do you think he had grown as a writer to that point to where the Fellowship was just that much more complex and dynamic?
Well, I don't believe that they were necessarily intended to be even in the same universe. I think everything in his mind was kind of in the same universe, but...
So we're the one who has to canonize everything?
Well, I mean, he decided they were in the same... He made the ring, it's like that. But I don't think when he was... I don't believe there's... And I'm sure that if if you're a Tolkien scholar, you can probably, correct this. But when Bilbo finds this magic ring, it's just a magic ring. Yeah. It's not the weapon of Sauron,
Yeah. Probably would have done more than just make him invisible if he'd been...
Yeah, and so he...
Had the forescan to see that ahead of time.
He...
What?
Nothing. So... yeah.
So can you explain, Michael, I'm looking at publishing dates for Tolkien, and The Hobbit is in 1937.
Okay.
Silmarillion is in 77. So what are all these other books?
Well, see, The Fellowship of the Ring.
When did he put out Holes, starring Shia LaBeouf?
What other...
Well, we have the appendices.
Yeah.
Which is what?
Well, that's actually just the appendix.
It just says the... Okay, I don't understand any of this. Are you seeing like Book of Lost Tales? I'm seeing The Tale of Aragorn and Arwen, Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
What?
Lead by Niggle.
Is it like a Lego one?
Bilbo's Last Song.
Adventures of Tom Bombadil. How come that one never comes up?
It's like a Lego one.
Yeah. So he wrote a lot. Most of everything else that has come out has been like Leaf by Niggle was published just by him, which is an interesting comment on his way of doing art, because a lot of people will draw a tree and then they'll go back and they'll kind of start filling in little lines that look like leaves. And he was very like, oh no, I want to draw a leaf. I'm going to draw another leaf. I'm going to draw another leaf here. And I really like drawing leaves. And he just draws leaves. And then eventually he's just like, oh, I got a lot of leaves. I got like a tree. It's a tree, you know? And he just starts, but that's how he starts. He starts with, here's a word. Here's a grammatical structure to add onto that word, and here's a sentence. Oh, I'm working on a language. So here's who speaks this language. I need a people. I need a place for these people. And and then he kind of starts building. Then he has this world, and and so it builds out from like a word.
Wow. So
Oh, I'm sorry. I get it. I see it now. I didn't have it in chronological order.
Okay.
So Fellowship of the Ring, 1954. Return of the King, 1955. Got it. Sorry. Sorry for that.
So the Silmarillion, basically, like the world was done for the most part. Like the history of the world was done when The Hobbit came out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and he, like he said, didn't publish that till the 77. But when you read The Lord of the Rings, I think the term he uses is like the dust of history is on everything. It's like you just feel that world is really old.
Yeah. Which is nice. It's really cool.
It is. And so you get this feeling that when you're in, when they're going from, the Shire to Bree, there used to be a kingdom of men that lived there that was like Gondor. There was a whole civilization up there.
Yeah.
And it's just gone. And so Weathertop was just one of their towers.
Yeah.
Like that tower you put, and when you're on the Age of Empires, you just put that one tower out there just so you can see something coming.
Yeah.
That was Weathertop.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like, I felt that I feel like Peter Jackson did such a good job with that stuff when we would see it. Like things just felt ancient. Like I remember even thinking like, at the end of the movie Fellowship where it's right as like when Aragorn is sort of challenged and he's basically tells Frodo to go right before the Uruks show up.
Yes.
And they're on that little weird, like, it's basically a patio with stairs up to another level of patio. And I remember just being like, what was that even? Like, that was probably something.
John, can you look up Amondine? Amon space Din? I think, again, I think that was like another, like, from a civilization before.
Yeah.
That was, a lookout.
Everything feels so old, so cool.
Yeah. And it is interesting when you go to those places and you think even the characters maybe don't know what they are. Because you get that in Greece. They have the Cyclopean walls that are so big. You think back to, the Greeks, did a lot of things. It's like the Greeks didn't even know what they were. The Greeks were like, these are huge. They're perfectly milled. Like a human cannot lift these stones. Obviously it was Cyclops, but it was like ancient aliens back in Greece. But
what is it you want to know about it?
Was that the Watchtower?
Yes.
Where
it was. Or you mean like it says that on Wikipedia that, which may be why it's the wrong information, was the first and perhaps the oldest of the 7 warning beacons of Gondor. Were you talking about Weathertop?
No. Okay, I'm not talking about Weathertop. I was wrong. Amondine. I don't know why that was. When you said the beacons of Gondor, it's like, yes, the beacons of Amondine are lit. I don't know. Somebody comment in the comments about what that place was. I know I don't have. Wait a second. Actually, because that actually happens. That scene actually happens at the beginning of the Two Towers. They just put it on the.
Yeah.
They put it at the end of Fellowship, so there would actually be a little bit of action.
Yeah.
There's no.
Yeah, I remember. I actually read them after the movies came out and being like, "Wait a minute." Yeah, it's a real dreary start to Two Towers. Having old Boromir. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't find it here. I
like how everything, you can kind of assume everything Elvish made is probably really old too. Every time it's like, oh, this was made by the elves, you're like, oh fuck, that's probably 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. I mean, Legolas is, I think, like 1,000 years old or something.
Yeah.
You know,
it's interesting when you see Star Wars try to do that because they'll do it with like machinery, and you're like, machinery just doesn't last that long. You know, they'll be doing it with like the sand crawlers.
Yeah.
Well, I could also make the argument that in Arizona things don't rust.
That is true.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
So, but for some reason, with like a sword or a piece of stone, maybe just because we've actually seen that, maybe that's why it's hard for my brain to like. We don't have machinery left around from 1,000 years ago like we do swords. You know,
which I'll say when you go to Europe, that's a thing that's really, you know, as an American, really strikes you because you know we see a house that's, you know, built in 1850 and we're like, wow, that's so old. How is it to heat this thing? You know, and I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's always like where people go is like, wow, cooling this thing in the winter must be, well, it's easy to cool it in the winter.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
In 1,000 years, we're going to be like finding those old Pizza Huts with the, with the brick walls with like the green glass thingies and with the red plastic cups and be like,
yeah.
Many men died here.
This was a feasting hall. But
feasting hall.
We will be McFeasting in the halls of Valhalla.
McFeasting.
But you know, when you go to, so my brother married a gal from Denmark, and we went and played a festival in Kolding, and we're able to stay with her family, and. You know, it was like they come over here and they're like, oh, we're going to go see the Mississippi. That's the big river. We're going, let's go see the Mississippi. And it's like, okay, cool. It's like, it's muddy and it smells funny, but like, you know, I mean, it's Mississippi. You go around it, you grow up around it, like, you know, like we did, and it's like, it's cool. You know, I learned to water ski on it.
Yeah.
You know, it
looks like chocolate milk.
It looks chocolate milk river. But like, they're just totally blown away by it.
Yeah.
It's like world famous.
Interesting.
And we go over there and they're like, oh, do you want to go see the castle? And we're like, you have a castle?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it was built in like, you know, 750. And we're like,
750.
What?
I remember walking down the street in England with you and or in London and being just thinking about the bricks that were under our feet. We're like, we're there and probably old and worn when George Washington was still like, you know,
during the War of the Georges.
Yes.
This would have been the part where Brad
he had to
talks
go
about
back across the Potomac to get his mask.
This would have been the part where Brad talks about the bricks in Hawaii if he'd.
Oh yeah, it's a good story.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he never would have made it past the rats.
But the so you know you get those castles in Europe that are like.
There's a Griswold castle from my mom's.
Dude,
you
should go claim it.
I've tried to find it like online.
You should just like go back and be like, I'm claiming this for my ancestors.
Yeah. It's probably a piece of shit castle and one of my ancestors.
Well,
it's like really dirty, and then there's like, here's the Green family also lived here, and they kept everything clean.
That would be amazing if your ancestors both lived at the same.
It'd be castle. Like you finding the cook guy from Monmouth,
dude. Yeah. Oh God.
So basically, one of the things that you and I have talked about is how Tolkien is writing this basically with World War I in mind. Right?
Yes.
And it's interesting to kind of think, and I just thought about, I don't know, you know, I haven't thought too deep into it, about the idea that really all that stuff that we see with Sauron's first coming almost could be like World War I, and then the next half could be World War II, and he didn't even realize he was necessarily writing it yet.
Yeah. I think
that's the thing with the defeat and...
Gosh, if you guys could only see what John was looking at. I think that's a really good point. You know, there is that. So one thing that you've brought up, what I always thought was really interesting, is the stark good and evil in Lord of the Rings. Which does not really exist in World War I. If you have that, you know, and if you don't study World War I, you know, it's like the Nazis weren't around. A guy didn't have a sandwich. Shot the Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke.
Yeah, and they sent somebody to tell him not to, and he didn't make it in time or something.
Yeah, it's like he went in to get a sandwich, and the guy couldn't find him, and so like there was this weird like passing in the night, and
$5.
So like a Serbian terrorist kills the. I forgot who are John. This is like 101 information I got to know. Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Gavrilo Princip was a Serbian in the Black Hand, right? And then Archduke was he? What country was he from?
He was where he was born.
Where was he Prince of? Come on, John. Come on, John. Come on. This is 101, so really, I mean, it's my fault here.
Austria, Hungary.
Okay, cool. So hence the sandwich. But
and it's like, here's another one just hit me. Saruman is almost like one of the Nazi like doctors, like splicing people together.
Yeah.
For Sauron.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out new ways to like create super soldiers.
Dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting,
which is a World War II thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so let's make that transition because Tolkien apparently, and I have not read these, but Tolkien talked in his diaries apparently when he first got there. It's like, well, you know, we're good, the Bosch is evil, Germans are not good, we're good, they're bad, and eventually, you know, was like, okay, there's good and bad on both sides. This is just a bad situation. This, you know, so like he kind of became aware by the end of the war. Or his time.
Sauron's like, you know, we're all a little wrong here.
I mean, you know, yeah, but so I mean, World War I was just like, you know, the Serbians kill the crown prince, and then they're at war. But then they've got an ally who's like, well, we're at war with you, and then somebody else's ally is like, well, we're at war with you, and so then all of a sudden, within a matter of like a week or two, the entirety of Europe was at war with each other, and it was like, well, this sucks, you know, and
I think, you know, another way to maybe even, for some reason, World War I always feels fairly modern to me. But when you think about the fact that, like, the golden age of, like, the cowboy, when you had, like, cartridged ammunition, like, you know, that post-Civil War, pre-1900s thing, all those guys could have served in World War I, is how close that is to, like, how hard information was to get around. So, you know, it's not like we just like, whoa, like we could today, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, cool, because when you want to tell Gavrilo Princip, don't kill the Archduke, you got to send a guy to find him.
Yeah.
You know, step in for a sandwich, World War I happens. Like, sucks. But, you know, it would be feasibly possible for somebody at the OK Corral to then go serve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the timeline. That's how quick.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy to me.
Everything really ramps up. Because, I mean, at the beginning of the World War, you do have, like, the French are putting cavalry in the field. They've got...
World War I's 1917, right? The first year?
14.
14, okay.
14 to 18.
Gotcha.
And so we got in at 17.
Okay.
You know, we were late bloomers on that. So the French, though, I mean, they had men on horses with armored breastplates, spears, and helmets. And it was like, you know, yes, this is kind of ceremonial, but also they were expected to fulfill a function, you know, and then machine guns happened and everything changes.
Yeah.
You know, machine guns and shrapnel from shells, you know, because you know, when when the artillery happens, you know, it's not a single bomb getting lobbed and then hits the ground and explodes. You know, that's exploding, you know, in the air. And it's basically a shotgun of tiny metal down. So that's why helmets are a thing. It's because you're not actually protecting yourself from a bullet in the head. You're protecting yourself from shrapnel from above. And so and this is not mine concept, but somebody played the sound of a ring wraith. And they said, well, this is, you know, what Tolkien describes the ring wraith, that really high shriek. And then it said, and here's the sound of an artillery shell coming in. Wow. And it was like, oh my gosh. That, you know, and it describes fear. And so then they went into shell shock. And I'm sorry, this is just a YouTube video. But if you type in Lord of the Rings World War I, it'll probably come up. You just watch them all. They're all great. But they also talk about like Frodo getting shell shock, you know, and having PTSD with, he never gets better.
Yeah.
You know, he's always in pain.
Oh yeah, he gives him sort of the physical wound to sort of represent it, but yeah.
Yeah, but then there's always that thing where on the day, you know, the day to the year to the day, after that wound, he always feels, it's like it's emotional, so it's like he can't live in the Shire anymore. He just can't do it. So,
that's cool.
There are one of the things that happened in World War I was there was like a transition of people were really positive about human progress, and then it just went. They saw what could happen in 4 years, and the whole tone of everything changed. And there was, if I could read a poem, I don't really want to read a poem, but if you pick up any compilation, there's like bookmarks, man, they're so hard. Okay, so this is Men Who March Away, edited by I.M. Parsons. The first one is called The Trumpet. And it's rise up, and the trumpet blowing chases the dreams of men, and dawn glowing, and the stars left. It's awesome, cool. Everything's good. You get to like halfway through, and then you get to.
And we're talking from the beginning of World War I to the end of it is kind of the tone change.
And so that was The Trumpet by Edward Thomas, and then you get Wilfred Owen's Disabled, and he sat in a wheeled chair waiting for the dark. Shivered, and the ghastly shade grew legless, sewn short at the elbow.
Legolas.
It was actually legless, but So it's like now they're talking about a guy who's got no limbs, and he's just sitting there, and he's got nothing to do except watch the people that he protected go out and have fun, and he's just going to sit there. That's really depressing. So, okay, you wanted to take this back to World War II, right? So.
I think to maybe even like almost the testament of Tolkien, knowing how things can go, and then seeing that it did go.
Yeah. And so he saw that World War I was not necessarily good versus evil, but he did have good versus evil in the Lord of the Rings. Orcs were bad, elves were good. But that is kind of how it played out in World War II. It's like you do have a guy who wants to kill everybody, and you have people that want to stop him from doing that. It's like that's about as good and evil as it gets.
On a subplot from our topic, so what's the elf's name from The Hobbit? The king?
Thranduil?
Yeah. So is his... Is he Legolas's dad?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not like his lineage of elves are dicks. He's just a dick, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I've always been like, am I supposed to believe that, Galadriel is just sort of like ethereal, and then the reason that I can't think of Rivendell's Arwen's dad.
Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson.
Elrond,
yeah. Because he's actually half human, right? Doesn't he have some sort of like half lineage?
Yes. So he is descendant of Beren and Luthien. Can you look up Elrond? I believe he is like the grandson of them, if I'm recalling my family trees, which it just shows you how old things are.
Yeah.
That there's this story, this ancient story of way back there. And he's like, oh yeah, that's my grandma.
Yeah. Because the elf doesn't die unless killed in Lord of the Rings, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why it's such a big deal for Eowyn to stay back and choose immortal life.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know. I think when I learned of that, I was surprised that Elrond was not a little more supportive of it, but maybe I thought also maybe he's just a little closer to the pain that it can give, rather than just be like, well, why not? I don't know. Try it. He's like, knows what'll happen,
So what?
Okay, so you have Elrond there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who's his mother and father?
Erendi.
Okay.
And Elwyn.
Okay.
I believe those are...
And who's that go back to?
I couldn't have used a a brighter font for weirder names. Wow, I don't even know how to say any of these.
Do you see Baron or Luthien anywhere in there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he's definitely connected to them about 2 generations back.
Okay, 2 generations. Okay, so but still, that's like that dust of history that Tolkien would that it's old. He is like direct descendant of these old stories.
Sorry to derail you. I was just curious if the elves being good was the one we're really close to, and his daughter, are they, because they're like half human, was why they were like a little more relatable, I guess, characters,
So, and I think that does bring up an interesting point about. Sorry, it does bring up an interesting point about what is good, because the elves and the dwarves are kind of in a cold war with, which is, if you know the story, it's very obviously the elves just being assholes.
Sure.
Because they give the gems to the dwarves and say, hey, will you fashion these? And the dwarves are like, sure. And they're like, all right, so you're going to pay us? And then the elves are like, no, the honor of working with these gems should be enough. And the dwarves are like, all right, well, we're keeping them then.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, that has been a huge, which is why Legolas and Gimli's friendship is such a big deal.
Yeah.
Which is, huge.
One of the cooler parts, I feel like, dynamics of anybody in the story too.
Yeah.
So sorry, but there's good and bad races.
Yeah.
So sorry, you can get back on the.
Yeah. So, but there's something about that kind of foretells, I feel like, World War II. Obviously, it comes out after World War II.
Yeah.
But his setup for it is coming before. So I think it would be interesting to. I don't know if there's maybe a Tolkien scholar out there who's actually worked with the influence of World War II on this.
It's kind of just wild too that we would, I feel like it's probably more of his background in literature that led him to a good and a bad in the story. It's more of like a Shakespearean derivative.
Yeah.
Like, and rather than like, that's how the war was, it's like, this is how you tell stories, like good stories. There's good and bad. And it's maybe just a fluke that we have like a war where it's so kind of definitive too with World War II, you know? Like, I don't know, has it ever been that definitive?
Yeah, I mean,
like in history ever, where it's like obviously people minding their own business and like someone deciding he's going to melt a genre of person he doesn't like, and then everybody else like sort of I know there's more to it than that, but it's definitely like you can be like, well, these people are bad.
Oh yeah.
It's not just like conquering for the sake of that's what you did back in the day.
Yeah. I like your use of genre there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can get more clear cut than it's like, well, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's bad, and we got to stop it. And I think that really,
like, even with the Mongols, you're probably like, well, it's probably based out of like, running like resources and like it's not like necessarily the people they're fighting are good people and they're bad people. It's just taking and
and the you think about the effect that would have on somebody after the war. It's like you go into the war in World War One. Let's say you get your legs blown off and you see your buddy get completely vaporized next to you. And then you go back home and you live and you have no legs and you just live the rest of your life and kind of know and have an ever dawning, more sense that war didn't need to happen.
Yeah. And you're referring to World War One or two?
Yeah, one. Yeah. So, it's like, so you're like, yeah, hey, my buddy got vaporized. I lost my legs. I was 18. That would be really hard to live with.
Yeah.
And World War II, you go in because there's this fascist dictator who's like trying to exterminate people. It's like, no, we have to stop him.
It's actually worth dying for.
Exactly. So your buddy gets vaporized, you lose your legs at 18, you come back home, you live the rest of your life, with that burden, but you've got a reason.
You did the right thing.
Yeah. It's like that kind of, I'm sure that has to have an effect in some way.
Yeah.
And and I'm not going to be like to say that I know, but like you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you
I don't
put
know,
it on
but
a,
you know.
if you put it on a really basic fundamental thing, like when you do something that you know it was right or that needed to be done, you feel a lot better than if you know you got kind of had.
Yeah.
You know.
So,
but you made all the sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. On a quick aside, you know, the French, Marquis Lafayette was the French general, I believe, that came over and helped us in the Revolution.
Okay.
And when Pershing went over, which, by the way, shout out from Missouri, Laclede, Missouri, General Pershing.
Pershing days.
Yeah. Oh. Him and there was another fellow who actually I believe made the speech, and I am so sorry I cannot remember his name, but they went to Marquis Lafayette's grave, and there was a speech given, and it ended with, "Lafayette, we are here." And there was that moment where it's like, "Hey, you helped us out, we're coming to help you out." I thought that was really nice.
That is really cool.
So I can't wait to go to France for the first time.
Yeah,
and they're probably going to be really confused. And anyway, so you had mentioned something about like stories is how you write stories with good and evil and stuff.
Yeah.
My favorite quote of all time from Lord of the Rings is when the Riders of Rohan surround the three hunters, and they're talking to Éomer.
Two Towers, right?
Yeah, right at the beginning here, and Hobbit said, "Éomer, and what may they be? Is a strange name for strange folks," says Gimli. You know, and then and he says, "Yeah, well, you probably know them as halflings." And then halflings laughed to the writer that stood beside Éomer. Halflings, but they are only a little people in old songs and children's tales out of the north. Do we walk in legends or on the green earth in the daylight? And then Aragorn jumps in with just the bomb here. "A man may do both," said Aragorn. "For not we, but those who come after will make the legends of our time. The green earth, say you? That is a mighty matter of legend, though you tread it under the light of day." And I just thought that was just, like, it gives me goosebumps every time, because it just takes this whole idea of the legend and myth, and it's like, no, that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And every myth you ever read, it's happening on an earth. The earth is there. The nature is there.
Yeah, I feel like a little goosebumpy from it,
dude.
I feel like too, when you think about, you know, when he was you know, it's like when they were there, the idea that like there may be a green earth, could be a legend from the trenches they were in. You know, like it essentially was a legend to them at that point.
Yeah, I mean,
know,
you wouldn't
like,
see green for miles.
Most of them never got to go back.
Yeah.
So for them, it was gone. You know,
and an odd twist to that whole thing is when you have that many men. I mean, millions of men dying and rotting there on the battlefield. I have never been, but anybody who will tell you that the grass there that grows now is like startlingly green, because it has just been so well fertilized with the dead.
Weird.
So Tolkien was friends with C.S. Lewis, and they were, you know, back and forth, and Lewis was one of the reasons that Lord of the Rings got published after The Hobbit, because, you know, it was this long, laborious process, and Tolkien typed on a typewriter with two fingers, you know, and really just packed it. And I think the manuscript, single pages, they said, was like feet tall a page.
Wow.
Lewis was a huge supporter of his, and really pushed him to, you know, to keep working on it, to keep reading it. And it was always really sad because Tolkien didn't like the Chronicles of Narnia, and was really like, I don't think, you know, put them down, but didn't support them in the same way.
Yeah.
And granted, they are different stories. They're like completely different kinds of stories even.
Yeah. So what was C.S. Lewis's religious background? Because his story is a lot more based in like religion, right?
Yeah. You know, so Tolkien grew up Protestant, converted to Catholicism. I mean, like I don't know the year, but like he was still a kid. His mom had converted, so he had basically then just been Catholic his whole life, but always Christian in some regard. Lewis was an avowed atheist.
It's so wild that their stories would be like,
And for years, and was very, extremely well educated, was, he wrote some poems around his time. And I don't recall the name of the book, but it's very good. John, could you find C.S. Lewis's, if you type in C.S. Lewis, Satan Speaks?
Sounds brutal.
Well, actually, if you listen to Holy Despair by Hill That I Upon, it's one of the last tracks is we just used those lyrics.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
What's the book called that's from?
Spirits in Bondage.
Oh, yes.
1919.
Yeah. So right after World War I, that comes out.
Wow, so he's writing quite a bit before Tolkien then too, if he's doing 1919.
Mm-hmm. He never quite had, he always wanted to be a poet, but it didn't quite work out, but his fiction did really well. So he had more consistent success. He was definitely the Merle Haggard, while Tolkien was the Johnny Cash.
I gotcha.
So Lewis, though, did eventually become a Christian, and it was he always described himself as the most reluctant convert. And there was these moments where he was, because he was very rational, and his tutor, he had a private tutor for many years, and his tutor said, "I'm going to teach you Greek so well you're going to dream in Greek."
Wow.
And he said he would have dreams and everything would be in Greek.
Wow.
And so he was very well educated, very rational, very staunch atheist. And there, if you read Surprised by Joy, he kind of describes his slow giving in. And he describes it like that. He wasn't seeking. He felt like, he describes it as if God was hounding him.
Wow.
And then my favorite bit of that whole thing, as such an astute college, man, and lettered man, and British, and he was apparently quite a drinker as well. When he would do Lent, people give things up. He would was like, well, I won't drink so much, but he was also really big, which of course, considering the
physically big.
Yeah, but maybe like Coulter Wall big, so maybe he's really tiny. I don't know.
So when you say tall or like a heavy set guy?
Both.
Okay.
I mean real thick.
Gotcha.
Not overweight necessarily, but so he could handle a lot.
You think Hagrid is based off of him?
Oh. But he describes his conversion experiences. He was he had a motorcycle, and he had a sidecar, and I don't remember if he was driving the motorcycle or if he was in the sidecar. I think his brother was driving the motorcycle and he was in the sidecar, and they were going to the zoo.
Okay. Is this one of the Lego movies?
Are they on holiday?
Yeah. But he said, he was like, well, I started that trip, and I was just what I was, and by the time I got to the zoo, I believed in Jesus Christ. And it was just like, and then we went and saw the animals, and it makes me happy to think of two brothers, adult, grown, professional men, just like, let's go see the animals. That makes me happy.
Was Narnia written as an atheist or a Christian?
As a Christian. And he defended, as far as I know, till his dying day, that was not an allegory for Christianity. He was not trying to say, let me just dress up Christianity in animals. He was just, I just wanted. Well, he kind of did the same thing to start that Tolkien did with The Hobbit, because Tolkien wrote in the hole in the ground lived a hobbit. He's like, well, what's a hobbit and why does it live in a hole? And he saw the faun, Mr. Tumnus from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So he saw the lamppost in the middle of the wood, Mr. Tumnus carrying packages with an umbrella in the snow, and he was like, that's interesting. Where's that? And then kind of started to build the story around that. He was very much a different writer. He would, when he would write the other Narnia books, though, he would just sit down and boom, he would just write it. And then he would maybe take another pass and hand it to the editor, and
interesting.
He'd write and have a book published in a year. Tolkien would take 17. Anyway, so.
Obviously, his effect on fantasy, all that time, it's almost like, he laid out all that time, the groundwork for thousands of writers, if not millions after him, whereas
Yeah. And I think, every fantasy writer, of course, just bows before Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
But J.K. Rowling really said that Narnia was a huge influence.
Yeah.
And of course there's 7 Narnia books or 7 Harry Potter books.
Yeah. And I feel like that world is not as, like you don't know everything about the world in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like if they just popped up, I feel like if there was another school, we'd be like, oh, there's another one?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's interesting. That never came up before.
Yeah.
But, that's cool. Let's go.
Why not? Where's my letter?
Yeah.
I think my letter got lost in the mail.
So one of the things I've always thought is kind of interesting about the Tolkien story is that there doesn't, to me, which maybe I just haven't thought about it enough, be a really obvious story of redemption in there.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about a few times. And I know that the storytelling part is maybe not as, like, Tolkien's strong suit is the world building.
Yeah.
And is there a reason, that the redemption thing is not a big part of it?
Yeah.
Or is it just it just didn't come up,
Yeah, so you have a specific example that you explain that.
So, and there's another one I was thinking about as you were talking about something you said earlier, that is you could have even given Smeagol redemption, but they didn't. Like, even at the very end, his addiction, it did not allow him to come back.
Yeah. And Gandalf kind of sets it up for, we don't know his part that he will play.
Yeah.
So you could argue that was his redemption, that he kept, because Sam probably wouldn't have been able to fight Frodo.
Yeah.
So maybe the fact that he was there to fight Frodo was the redemption.
Yeah.
But it is a very gray.
It's a weird, like, unconscious, like, I feel like from him being someone who is religious, I feel like redemption a lot of times is for the individual who gets it too, not just everybody, not just their story around them and everybody else. It's for their own heart too.
Yeah, because Smeagol dies.
Yeah, and he doesn't get a, like,
yeah,
he dies like being an addict.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and especially in a story of right and wrong and good and evil, you wouldn't expect that to be such a gray area. Yeah, because redemption is what it's all about. Yeah, so you wouldn't expect the whole point of it to be. Yeah, and he was not a bad person. He is an addict. Yeah, he's addicted to heroin. Yeah, basically. So the corruption is an interesting thing to consider with that, because you have the good and evil. And that's not really debated. And maybe that's a different way to think about it. Because if I could just pop back to C.S. Lewis for a second, he did some talks during World War II that were supposed to be like they were radio broadcasts, and they were of a religious nature, and they eventually became the book Mere Christianity. Like Mirror Christianity, or like mirrors and like simply because the idea was we're going to have somebody on the radio talking about Christianity, and it's the 40s, and even at that time Britain was like, well, we don't really want to offend anybody, and you have Catholics and Anglicans and so he was like, all right, well, I'm gonna do something, like, I'm not going to talk about Mary because only Catholics and Orthodox are into her. I'm not going to talk about Pippin. I'm not going to talk about speaking in tongues, because that's something that only evangelical, certain set of evangelicals are really into. So we're going to just talk about mere Christianity for everybody, so we can kind of just agree on that. So he starts off the book with talking about these remarks about and he kind of used these as like quotes. How would you like it if anyone did the same thing to you? That's my seat. I was there first. Leave him alone. He isn't doing you any harm. Give me a bit of your orange. I gave you a bit of mine. Come on, you promised. So there's like these little quotes about people expecting, like, well, you said you'd do this, or, So he says, now what interests me about all these remarks is that the man who makes them is not merely saying that the other man's behavior does not happen to please him. He is appealing to some kind of standard behavior which he expects other men to know about. A man with a code. He has a code. So, and the other man very seldom replies, to hell with your standard. He nearly always tries, to make out that what he has been doing does not really go against the standard, or that there's some kind of special excuse. So I think that's always a really interesting, situation, especially if you drive and somebody cuts you off. You're like, wow, they are a terrible driver.
Yeah.
100% of the time, they're a bad driver.
Yeah.
And then of course you're in the car and somebody, if you're riding with somebody, they cut somebody off. It's like, oops, I don't normally do that. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But nobody questioned the fact that there's a standard that you should drive well.
Yeah.
Sure. It's very rare that you see somebody that goes, I do what I want, the rest of you can go to hell.
Yeah.
And when you do, we call that person a psychopath.
Yeah.
Or sociopath.
Socio.
Either one, it's a path. It's not good. There's a special category.
The words are the same definition. I remember this.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Twisted psychopath?
Yeah, just a psychopath.
Psychopath?
It's just basically like if you're looking at it from nature or nurture.
Oh, okay.
They got one of those in Rocheport, right? the twisted psychopath?
Yeah. Okay. So it's when somebody says, no, I don't have, I don't care about your standard. We say, well, you're a special category of something we have labeled, and we're going to put you over here. So the idea then is there is a standard, and he talked later then about, there are universal standards as far as like you can't kill people, you can't. Now there are of course variations as far as maybe you can kill someone if it's revenge in some places. You can kill somebody for revenge, like in our society, but you have to have the state do it. It has to be, judicial punishment. You can't just go kill somebody. You can kill somebody if you can prove they're trying to kill you. So there are exceptions, but nobody believes you should just be able to kill anybody.
Do you remember, like when you were little, questioning that the first time? I have a very vivid memory of like asking my mom when I was like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7.
Okay.
Like if soldiers get to go to heaven.
Oh, yeah.
And if they do, who has to go to hell for the bad?
Yeah.
Or the death, the murder.
Yeah.
Or the kill,
You mean, so you're saying that somebody has to take the punishment?
In my mind, somebody had to have the punishment. And it was was it the person that told them to do it? Or was it like, because it's the state, no one is responsible?
It's Jesus.
Whoa! Tanner's questions debunked.
Yeah. Debunked. That's a good point. That is.
So I mean, there's now he also talks about.
That's not what my mom said. She just said, no.
He talks in The Weight of Glory a little bit about, why would we still continue to be scholars while they're over there fighting a war, and he talks about why I'm not a pacifist, and he talks about these questions. Whether he answers them or not, I guess, is whether you agree with his presuppositions or not. But
just bringing up the question a lot of times is, the job.
Yeah.
So I guess bringing it back to Smeagol, you could even. He reminds me of a really modern character from a story. Like today when you get a story where you're like, well, this is a sad story, but it's still a story worth telling. Like you get a story like The Wrestler, like my favorite movie, right? It's not a happy ending. It's not a classic like archetype, but that story does happen.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's almost like Gollum, a person can get to that and like have that addiction or have that and like not actually get to, they just die from it.
And it just takes them down.
Yeah, it just takes them down. So then the other thing you were talking about that we've talked about before is if he had decided for a redemption story, who would get it? And I think earlier when we were talking, I sort of ran through my mind why that wouldn't work. But I've always thought, what if the story focused more around Gandalf and Saruman's thing?
Yeah.
And Saruman got the redemption. And somehow the two of them either like make it there, or like Gandalf has to take the ring and Saruman's there, or somehow
they go round up the blue wizards and Radagast.
Yeah,
and just like, go storm the.
We've got to take these dudes down, and then the five of them just like go in, and Saruman gets to self-sacrifice. For his redemption at the end. You get the, but I think the thing that makes that not possible for this story is the whole thing that the wizards are sort of this like angelic type character, where they're almost in that, they're not as like extreme as the Bombadil thing, but it's like they can guide people through the world, but they can't do it for them. So that's where the Saruman almost seems to take more control of like what he's supposed to do than the other ones. Gandalf is still like hardly ever doing all the work. Like he'll go and I feel like talk to people, but like when he goes out on his own, it's to guide someone or try to coerce them or get information for someone else. It's never like he's just going like, well, I'm gonna go kick Saruman's ass. It's like, and I'm going to do it. Like when he's you know what I mean.
That's really interesting.
So to focus it on that would almost maybe even bring the story up to a weird plane of unrelatable to like a reader. It's like, because they're not humans.
I think they're. So Tolkien was not trying to write a Christian allegory, so I don't know if that's just, well, I was just writing the story and that's where it went and there was no, you just said something though, which actually I had never thought about before. It's like, when you said Saruman gets to self-sacrifice and it was like, well, if we're considering it to be a Christian allegory, no one is sufficient for self-sacrifice. That's the whole point.
Gotcha,
is that we are not good enough, to say that we are, well, I'll just keep the law. It's like, well, you can't. You will fail. It's too much. You need somebody better than you. It's a debt that's, too great for you to pay. You need somebody who's got, more money, more, more goodness, so maybe the idea of a self-sacrifice would break the allegory.
I wonder, I'm sure it's probably a pretty simple thing if you study this type of thing, but like where the idea that redemption for a character has had done so much bad that in the end they have to give their life to basically fulfill their redemption. That's a really common, it's like we get it with Kylo. We get it with Vader. We get it like when they've done that much wrong, how could they ever, maybe it's they just can't exist in the world after that, once they've kind of, like, where do you go once you've done that much bad? So they just have to be written out. But I don't know. I'd be curious to know what the first, it's probably Shakespeare, but, none of the Shakespearean stories I know to mind are, but I can only really think of, like, Romeo and Juliet, and she's not, because he's the one who accidentally dies, right? And then she takes the poison, or is it vice versa? But that's not for like, there's no redemption in that. It's more of a romance thing.
I don't know. You're really shaking my world here. And then maybe the fact that somebody dies when that redemption happens is not the redemption.
But it's like the redemption always happens before it.
Right, and then they die. So maybe the death is not sorry, I'm trying to like work this out. But maybe the death is not part of the redemption. But maybe as George Lucas says, it's poetry. It rhymes. Maybe the fact that they die is merely because the great sacrifice died. So it's like, oh, well, here's my little sacrifice. Oh, and I can die too. Maybe that's just part of the genre of sacrifice. Because that's what it is you kill something. Originally.
I wonder if, it's like in us so we always, I'm obviously like everybody like, if they, at some point in their life probably seeks redemption for something, but like, I feel like in your, on your daily life, you are not the person who's seeking redemption unless you've just done something awful. You are like seeing the other, like when you are seeing redemption, like you are not relating to Kylo Ren in Star Wars. You're watching someone get redemption. So maybe them needing to die is it's the part for you. It's the capital punishment. Yeah. That's the prison. It's like, because even if you do something really terrible, but you redeem yourself, it's like if you drowned or you stabbed your dad with a lightsaber, and you were responsible for your mom's death, and you killed all these people. It's like, well, everybody else standing here, it's like, well, we can't let you come just hang out now. Yeah. You've killed off half the cast. And so maybe that's for what in a story, what is the character called that you are basically perceiving, the one you relate to? Is there, I guess just the protagonist? Yeah. So like maybe you as the protagonist need to see that person punished, even though they themselves got the redemption. But for you, the protagonist, there still needs to be atonement for the sins that happened.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they always have to die.
Man, yeah, this is wild, and this is something that, like,
yeah, I live with this. We have these deep questions. So I'm just like,
John's like trying to make a table, and I'm like, well, have you thought about?
Well, so but that's something that is fair, like something that, like, Christian pastors and thinkers and things will continually bring up about, you sin. And then some people then just carry that around with like, wow, I have been a terrible person. It's like, well, you have. I have. Everybody did it to varying degrees based on it. But what's always really important and often forgot is in the Christian sense, because, that's where, I keep coming back to, because we're kind of comparing Lord of the Rings from that. But, there's not, you're good, they're bad, I'm good. It's lawbreaker.
Yeah, because that's a sin is not necessarily, because law breaking usually hurts someone else.
Right.
Sin might just be you.
So that brings us back to Lord of the Rings in a different way with Saruman, with Smeagol being an addict. So Western Christianity is fairly judicial in its representation of, you have broken the law. Jesus is there to pay that debt. You are now no longer accused. So now that you're no longer accused, don't feel bad. Don't walk around with the guilt, because to do that is almost a slap in the face. To say that, yeah, I know you paid, but I still want to feel bad about it. Thanks. Other, in like Egypt and in the East, they don't see it as a law sort of situation. It's more of a, and I don't know as much about this, so I want to be, I'm not trying to say what it is. It's less that and maybe more personal on a corruption level. And, you've been corrupted. Let's get you uncorrupted, try to undo, so that is something that I've heard folks talk about in The Lord of the Rings, that, orcs are elves that have been corrupted. Saruman becomes corrupted. Smeagol becomes corrupted. I am a little surprised that there is not some sort of uncorrupting that happens.
Yeah.
Because that would be, which maybe that's Frodo going to the Undying Lands. Maybe there are different ways that's happening that maybe the uncorrupting happens on such a different level than the corrupting, which would make sense.
Maybe for Tolkien, we're talking about, if your leg's blown off, you don't uncorrupt from that, which is maybe the physical aspect of like, Gollum or an orc, We do have Theoden. Sorry.
Yeah. I just remember that.
Yeah.
We do have Theoden.
I was going to bring him up. I can't remember why now, because I feel like that's a better reason to bring him up.
So he is under the spell of somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's broken.
Yeah.
So
a person, like an individual.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. So maybe that's the difference. Maybe he's not gone far enough. Maybe it was just because he was put under the spell. maybe.
Is Saruman under Sauron's spell, or is Saruman acting as a Nazi doctor, and he's just like, maybe at first it was just like, well, what else am I gonna do? I live here, and he's coming back, so I might as well be sitting on a chair underneath his throne.
I believe he is described as he found the Palantir.
Okay.
And it was pride, which is Lucifer's sin, which is his, the first great sin. So he thought he could use that, and he was deceived. He couldn't. I don't know if it says that Saruman put him under the spell, or if then he became corrupted based on that. But I think that was, like what we see him in The Hobbit, which obviously that was written in for the movies. But I think that was, him as not a nice guy necessarily, but not corrupted fully.
Yeah. It's almost more Greek, in that like the hero's fatal flaw is always hubris. It's always pride.
Yeah.
And that's what always gets them into troubles. And they're always like sort of a demigod. So maybe that's like kind of Saruman's thing. He's a half god, kind of, in a way, And pride was his downfall.
Yeah.
So he sort of has a Greek thing about him. Gandalf doesn't have it, though. Like, I don't think we hardly ever see pride from Gandalf's camp of like affecting him negatively.
Well, he is very much fashioned after Odin from a Norse perspective. He is the traveler, and there are old drawings of Odin, which is Gandalf, but he's got one eye and no hat. It's like the same old beard, long staff.
Dude, having Gandalf with an eye patch would have been pretty dope,
dude. So you were talking though about Saruman, and it just occurred to me we do have the Shire, which of course I
oh yeah.
So they
like when he goes there, you mean?
When they go back, which is of course not depicted in the movies, but when they go back, the scouring of the Shire, they, holy crap! Sorry, I'm sorry, folks. I was not more up on this. But you said so Saruman didn't have redemption, right? But he was given an opportunity, because they run into him.
Yeah, I just always forget that happens because it doesn't happen in the movie, and that's what I watch over and over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, and the movies are done so well, but there is that brief moment where they just like, they're riding and they run into him, and they're like, "Oh, hi, Saruman," and he's like, and they're like, "Just go," and he's like, "Fine," and like they let him go, and they say like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa,"
they say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa."
Are you okay there? Sorry, John. Can you? Okay, I think we're okay. Earthquake.
John's playing WoW over there.
Sorry if I peeked it. So they give him an opportunity for redemption, and he goes back to the Shire.
What would it be at that point? Just an admission of redemption?
I'm sorry I didn't bring that. I don't.
That part always seems so strange to me.
Yeah, but like I think they say like, can you just go use your powers for good, or just don't do anything, maybe. And I'll admit I don't remember that part was, so I don't even try to find it right now. If it's even in, I only have the Two Towers with me.
It's interesting they wouldn't off him.
Yeah, but they give him the opportunity, and he goes to the Shire, and then takes it over, and like pulls up all the trees, and imprisons a bunch of people.
Yeah,
builds all those really big, because Tolkien he was from near Birmingham, so there's lots of plants going up, and it was industrializing, and he really didn't like that. So you see that in Orthanc, you see that in the Shire, then becoming more industrialized, more houses out of ground rather than built into the houses with the trees and the grass. And but they go back, they take it back, and then they start, Sam plants the Malorn tree, and they start to regrow it. So there is some uncorrupting that happens there.
Yeah. If he'd redeemed, would he have had to die right afterwards? Or would you think they would have like just brought him along? It's like, how do you hang out with that guy after that? Even if he'd like...
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I just can't seem to look at you the same for some reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it was all that death.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's tough because like all those elves, you know, there's like those 200 elves that showed up at Helm's Deep. Which
am I right that does not happen in the book?
Right. Yeah. It's.
I was going through one of those like all the things that you seem to remember happening when you read it, and the movie just did it, and I was like, no way.
But it's a great part in the when the horns come. Oh, it's so great.
Yeah.
But every single one of those elves died. You know, they are never shown any elves after that. And so, you know, if you think, okay, all these elves are eternal unless they're killed, and they are all killed.
Yeah.
They all go to Helm's Deep and they all die. You know, but they sacrificed themselves for the race of men. You know.
Yeah, I wonder if... Do you think, Jackson maybe was trying to make the elves a little more relatable? Maybe that was like a play for that, It's like because I feel like in the, when you're reading about them, they kind of party, right?
Yeah.
In the books, and it's like in but, I feel like they really do live up that idea where it's like, dude, I could live forever if I just don't go do this stupid thing right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that was to kind of bring the elves back to, for the audience to be perceived as good guys.
Yeah.
Not super selfish, which they just kind of are, but like you would be if you were.
Yeah. Well, and they're
1,000 years old.
Yeah, and they're on the decline, so it's like, well, we've been in these battles before. And
yeah. I think there's something in the like a human being realizing their mortality is like at best 90 years. So if you're like, if I die in my 30s, it's like, well, it wasn't like it was going to be that much longer, and it was probably going to go downhill anyway. And if I can die for a good thing, then that's better than living another 60 years just fucking off.
Yeah.
Whereas an elf, it's like, might go through 100 wars.
Yeah.
And if you live, it's always just as good after that war. You're not, like, your body isn't even degenerating.
Yeah.
Like how differently you would kind of think about everything.
What's interesting, though, is they do talk about the elves being jealous of mortality in some regards, because there's something about...
It's nice they'd put that in, actually, so it's not just like, ooh, my life's awesome.
Yeah, but they do, it's like, well, the sweetness that men get is real intense because it's only going to last for so long.
Yeah.
And elves then kind of get like...
Sorry.
that sweetness, that vanilla.
For some reason, that reminds me of like the Barbossa scene in Pirates of the Caribbean Black Pearl, where it's like...
Taste an apple.
Yeah. And to think if you had lived... Because I don't remember what I was reading. I don't remember if it was in like a psychology class or whatever, or if I just found it. But the idea that time goes by quicker when you are older because everything around you have now already perceived it.
Whoa.
Like, you think about when you were a kid and you were like looking at the ceiling and you're like, why is it like spiky? Like, why did we spackle it? Like why would we make the ceiling sharp?
Why is there dried beer on the ceiling?
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh, there is.
I know why there's dried beer on the ceiling. Tune back to Heavy Western show. Whatever it was, I don't know. That was probably Facebook Live or something. But
yeah,
so you, as time, it's like you don't look at like what tires look like anymore when you're in your 30s.
Yeah,
and you don't get interested by the pattern on walls anymore or carpet.
Yeah,
like you do when you're little, or like how you like when you're little you chase like raindrops going down the window. You don't do that as an adult. You've already done it. So like the things around you are just like, it's like why I feel like the first movie of everything is always better because it's always new. It's like everything in Lord of the Rings is new and fresh and awesome, and like things aren't like cataclysmic yet in Fellowship or like Pirates of the Caribbean Black Pearl or A New Hope or anything where you're just soaking it all in. So by like the time you're to the 8th one, the idea of a lightsaber doesn't even like, it's cool, but you're not like, whoa, like, what is it?
Yeah.
And that's supposedly part of why time goes by so much faster. You worked a job, the same one for 10 years. Nothing about that job fascinates you anymore. Like nothing is like the learning experience of it is gone. That's
deep.
Maybe the key to stretching out time for yourself is learning your whole life rather than becoming complacent. And the more you learn, the slower time goes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. I don't have it. Oh, the why mortality is sweet.
Yeah.
And like, imagine if you were 500 years old.
Yeah.
And you were an elf in Middle Earth. You know everything.
Yeah, so time would be going really fast.
Yeah.
But it would just be like endless fast time of...
A month would feel like nothing.
Yeah. Your life would be like that YouTube video of the Lord of the Rings, but every time they say ring, it speeds up. And the entire movie is 8 minutes long or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Moria takes like 1 second.
I wish we had more of in Fellowship, the movie in particular, because I know that I wish we got to see
more walking.
I love the walking, and I was like, walking. Me and my dad would go look for shed antlers when I was little, I would always be pretending I was in Fellowship, like walking over the hills and the mountains and the rivers and stuff, looking for shed antlers. Nice. And I'd bring a sword, of course, so I could hit weeds and stuff, pretend they're orcs.
Nice.
But
you get a few beers and you still do that out here in the cul-de-sac.
I do. I really love all that window into the depiction of the rings, and we see them very briefly. You know, like we get to see the three elven ones quite a bit. You know, Gandalf having one, and Elrond, and
they don't show because Gandalf doesn't have it at that point.
Okay.
He gets Gil-galad's, and they show Gil-galad, who that was like the only moment they show him. But he's the guy who had the spear, Aeglos, and Sauron just grabs him, and like he bursts into flame.
So cool.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. So he I think his ring was then given to Círdan the shipwright.
Okay.
Who then they eventually gave it to Gandalf. I'm sorry. I just love that little tidbit there.
It's super cool. I love the rings, like all the different ones. And we've talked about like why. So say Tolkien was retconning the Great Ring, the One Ring, right? And
what is retcon?
It's where you like go back and you hadn't thought about that, so you like write in as a reason, like it's like writing in that Boba and Jango are Mandalorians again. They've retconned that into it being. I have no idea what the abbreviate or like the acronym or whatever it is for, but that's what people say.
John, can you find this out? Retcon.
But so, I like the idea that ring is so powerful to the right wielder, that the only weird side effect that a mortal even experiences from it is just invisibility. And that's just like, imagine explosion, and it's like you're getting the like tip of the radiation over here, and it's not hurting. Well, it is hurting them. It's like eating their mind. But, I wish, like, do the other ones have things they do?
I know they are associated with stuff.
I didn't know this. Retcon stands for retroactive continuity.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. So everybody says that, but that's good. Retroactive continuity. But
I like that.
So is the magic attribute of them just that they can be controlled? Maybe were they not magic when gifted?
Yeah.
But they are magic. It's like they're just in the same way that like an elvish sword is like magic. It's not necessarily doing anything other than like glowing.
Yeah.
It doesn't like shoot lightning out of it or something.
Dude, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it's just like the
Force
idea you have magic.
Yeah.
But the short story long, I wish we got to see more of the dwarven ones.
Oh yeah.
You see them on that little like pillow or something there, like right for just a second, and be cool if you got to kind of dice those up more.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be cool to have more, like the Star Wars visual encyclopedias. It'd be cool if they had more like just like each ring, what it does, a nice.
They exist. You saw them.
Yeah.
So it's like,
come on, Peter Jackson, show us.
Yeah. Remember when we'd looked up who made them, and he was a man?
Yes.
It was a human. And I feel like we'd always like you're led to believe it's elves, but it was like he was like commissioned, or he was the same type as like Aragorn or something. There was something different about him.
Yeah,
but he was a man, or like a half half elf or something.
I remember we were at Palin.
Yeah. And the artwork for him is really cool if you like look him up on Wikipedia.
Yeah, he looks like a D&D card or something.
Yeah, like a super old like 80s
Magic card.
Yeah. I can't seem to remember his deal, but
yeah, I don't recall anything about him to even say like who made the ring, because I think Sauron was the one who commissioned him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
but everything magical. Maybe that was to get one over on the elves, because everything like I feel like magical or like that they would be the ones making.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to make a ring that would screw them over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they wouldn't make a ring like that, and they might not even trust. If I know there was a note in that with whatever we were reading about Sauron being the gift giver and being known as the gift giver and being more wholesome appearing, and then there's the joke about like, gee, Saruman, why's your house all so spiky? And then like, and then Sauron's like, okay, he's got the big spiky helmet.
Gandalf's there and he's like looking around, he's like,
yeah. So you think about like the Sauron we see in the war. It's like big spiky helmet, flames everywhere. It's all black. It's like here's a ring. It's like
funny
whoa
when he brought you that like complimentary like
it's like Galadriel. Here's a ring. It's like oh hey spiky man thanks. It's like maybe that was part of you. Maybe he obviously probably had some more wholesome appearance, but then that guy is making the rings and.
Yeah, Sauron is always... I mean, I think he's very oddly Hitler-like for being a predecessor to Hitler, as far as the story. And we were talking yesterday about how he's weaker in man form than he is as an idea.
Yeah.
Remember? And it was like, but, an idea... The man has to have the idea. The tyrant has to have the idea. But in that form of like just fear and tower and like just this weird, he can see everything, he's way stronger.
Yeah.
Rather than when somebody could just cut his finger off and take everything away.
Yeah. Yeah. Just slice, done. But then as the spirit, as that idea really moves.
Yeah.
That's an really interesting parallel to Nazi Germany.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know that's one thing that I always heard growing up was like, oh, well, not everybody knew what was going on. The Germans, and, that I think pretty soon, you start to hear, no, we knew.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody knew. They just didn't want to, even if they were uncomfortable with it, they just didn't want to think about it. And so you have a lot of complacence.
Well, you can see like... You see it like, in the United States and moving towards ideas where you're like, there'll be a large mass of people, 50% of people who are going towards an idea and you're like, you don't think that, do you? Like, there's no way you'd let that happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why not?
Yeah.
You're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Deed.
Wait. So you're saying you want your house to be all big and spiky... And that's just an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's usually, I feel like, we could boil it down to everybody in Germany probably felt like a victim.
Yeah. Well, because the reparations screwed them in World War I. They basically were one of the belligerents in World War I, and they basically paid the whole bill for the,
Yeah. And they were like, I feel like a lot of the stuff we see around here, it's like people feel like victims, but maybe they are, or maybe they're not as much as they think they are, but there's power in convincing someone they're a victim or feeling like you're a victim.
Yeah.
And I feel like even on an individual level, like, the type of person where they gather strength and that their day always sucks. And when they talk to you, something about their life is always bad. And when something goes good for them, they try to figure out a way to make it bad, because if their life is just good and you're like, oh, it's really awesome, I'm glad that happened to you.
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's not always like this. Well, I had to pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
And you're like, why can't you just, there's no power and just like, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's So basically what you're saying is that person is Sauron.
I'm saying, well, I feel like, do you think orcs, the Easterlings, they side with him, like an orc is, that they're a person who is, through their, probably,
They have been manipulated.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I didn't even think about this. There's a excellent bit in the book where, because it happens in the movie where the Ithalian Rangers, they shoot one out of the tower on the Oliphant. He falls down, boom, right in front of Sam and Frodo.
That part of the movie is super cool too.
It is. And Sam has a thought, which you don't get in the movie, but it's about, whoa, who is this guy? Where's he from?
Yeah.
Did he want to come here? Or did he just get coerced into coming here? And it's this really human moment where Sam's gives credence to his enemy about just well, maybe you're just caught up in this too. I didn't want to come here, and you think about that in a war setting. It's like you're there, your enemy's there, and you're like, well, I don't really want to be here. You don't want to be here. I don't want to shoot you. You don't want to shoot me. But neither of us want to get shot, so one of us is probably going to shoot first.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Is that maybe all the Germans are hurting and upset enough to go, but the country next to them is just they're just gonna consume us.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, I guess that's what we got to do. It's like if it's that or be wiped out. Or they convince them that the place that Germany wants to take hold of, they've manipulated them into also feeling like maybe this country aren't victims,
but they get
manipulated into feeling like they are by the Germans, who maybe just actually are victims. It's like, come on, are you gonna let these people take that from you all the time?
Yeah,
like, yeah,
and that's a really interesting point where it's like the Germans were actually victims of just totally getting their economy scraped out. They had their factories cleaned out, the machines taken out. I think there was a guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I think his father or his grandfather cashed in their retirement, and it was a literal wheelbarrow full of money, and they bought a box of strawberries. It's that's how far the mark had fallen of the or the German mark. Had fallen. There just wasn't worth anything. So it's there was no moral reason for World War I. It's the Germans in 1914 were not, evil, but they got screwed really bad, and that was real. They were victims of that. It's France got it too, but they didn't have to pay any money afterwards. So basically, Germany paid America, Britain, and France. Because going to war costs a lot of money. You got to buy guns, you got to buy planes, you got to buy tanks. So Germany basically paid for that. It's hey, I'm going to buy you tanks to come kill me. That's what that was for. So it's yeah, you'd be really upset. It's wow, hey, I survived the war. Now my economy's in shambles. And then somebody comes by and says, oh, hey, how you feel really bad? It's the Jews' fault. And it's
yeah,
no,
you don't
that's not right.
There's no internet.
Yeah.
There's no communication. There's no. So if you're just a farmer, and 4 times someone tells you that, you're like, yeah. Why am I the one who gets screwed?
Yeah.
What did I ever do to anybody?
But before anybody thinks we're justifying this, that's not how you deal with it. You don't go exterminate 6 million people.
Obviously, that person's wrong.
Well, yeah, it's okay, this sucks, and you are a victim, but you can't go exterminate 6 million people because that's not how you deal with this. There's something else we got to do. And so I feel like Britain and France and the Allied powers in World War I, and that it's included in America. We set that up to happen. To some degree.
Sure.
And I don't know if you could draw a parallel then to Lord of the Rings in some way.
I think it'd be safe to say the orcs are definitely, they're shitty. That's a thing about that particular character is they are shitty. They're always shitty. But they're definitely always getting their ass handed to them.
Yeah.
So them wanting to finally kick all the elves' asses and the men's asses is well, yeah, they want to do that. So there's no I don't feel like it takes much coercing to get a band of orcs to follow Sauron, whereas the Eastern Leaves, maybe it was a little harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're not even like nearby. You know, they're way over. You know, you have to get a pretty like some Middle Earth maps don't even show Harad on.
Yeah,
you know, it's like you have to get a bigger map to even see where they're from.
Like, I wonder is it economic for them? You know, is it like if this person's taking over the place where we get our resources, we want to be with them, like an oil type thing?
Maybe.
You know,
and you know, I think they're like Mordor is like northwest of Harad, so it's like.
Do they ever really talk about why the Eastern Leaves are involved? Even
just that Sauron. Well, Sauron started, I think, giving them stuff, paying tribute, and they're like, "Well, this guy seems pretty cool," you know.
Yeah,
spiky face, but you know, hey,
yeah. For some reason, it's just a weird. He is a tower. I've never met a man who was a building before, but he keeps giving us things.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, the weird predictive text that Tolkien generates about World War II is really pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, before anybody roasts us in the comments, you know, it's like I think we both understand that came out after World War II. But, you know, he was working on this so far before. It's like I don't believe World War II happened and he was like, oh, hey, well, you know, how about I just, you know, because you could say that this whole good and evil thing was in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Whether it was the Ring and Sauron or not.
Yeah,
you know, good and evil was in the Silmarillion, which was started in, you know, when he was in World War I. So it's like the idea of good and evil has started before. So it is still, you know, the Fellowship came after 10 years after World War II.
Yeah.
But the predictive part that you're talking about,
The thing I'd set that up for was that Sauron was a man originally, just a dude, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know what race or if he was human.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, he was a creature.
He wasn't like a wizard.
He wasn't just a spiky dude.
Yeah. But he turned himself into a god in the same way, like that Hitler. Like if you were to compare the two, you know, whereas he was just a guy, you know, kind of had come up through the ranks, similar to.
Well, you know,
Hitler served in World War I, right? As like a.
Oh my gosh! Sorry, you're talking. Yes, he did, and there were several unfortunate instances where he almost died, and he was just like they actually said that he was very lucky because he would be in a foxhole and he'd be like, I'm going to go over there, boom, and then it would you know, there's one time he walked out of a tent. And just like it exploded, right?
Weird,
you know, it's like, I mean, there was like several times.
The universe is strange.
It is. But so you're talking about this though. He served in World War I. You know, the Germans lost. They had to pay, and he came back. Sauron, if you're talking like Silmarillion stuff, Morgoth was the real big bad guy, and he was like actually an angel, like of the, you know, one of the Valar, you know, part of the higher order of creatures.
Higher than a wizard?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, way, you know, so
is he like Satan, kind of? And
yes. Yeah, and they have the same origin story, is that there is Eru, who is the one, or, you know, I can't remember what the title is, but it's very similar to I Am in the Christian tradition, that it's, you know, there is the one, Eru, you know, and he has the Valar, and they're singing.
Okay.
And Melkor. John, can you type in Melkor? I feel like I'm getting Melkor and Morgoth. I'm not sure if we're dealing with two variations here. So Melkor, though, was the one who then was like, oh, I'm going to sing my own thing. He starts singing his own melody. And Eru's like, bro, you can't, no. We're singing a symphony here. You've gone off and done your own thing. That's fine.
He's like,
yeah, so he's like, well, I'm going to work it back into my melody. But what you have done has created a world, and I'm going to put you on that world. And he takes all the Valar and he puts them on Middle Earth. Says, you will have to live on this now and work. And they become the river god and the sea god and the mountain god. And he is the Satan, basically. What do you got?
What was it you needed to know?
Melkor.
What about him?
What he's one of the Valar, right? And is it mentioned Morgoth?
Yeah, later known predominantly as Morgoth.
Cool. Okay.
Same person.
Yeah. So I was really worried that I was getting my names mixed up. But so Sauron was a lieutenant of Morgoth. So Morgoth is defeated, and Sauron's just still here. So there's that first defeat, and then the lieutenant becomes and then the lieutenant comes back for World War II, and
and becomes like astronomically stronger than an individual should ever be able to,
And he tries to wipe out the race of man. It's like he was trying to Man, there's some really interesting parallels we've drawn here that I wasn't expecting to get to.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, and it's just like, is it weird that it's like that the a story sort of written around World War I ends up being more like World War II, or like a lot like, or having that aspect of it? Or is it weirder that World War II is so what would the right word be? Like, is so of a good story, like what you would consider a really well written. That's almost strange. It's like, what war is like well written if you were looking at it as if an author wrote it?
Yeah, that is wild. That is, so many different words you look at it and you're just like, man, this is just a cluster. It's just everybody's being an asshole.
Yeah.
And
everybody just dies.
Yeah. And it's just like, cool. What'd we get? A lot of people died. Oh, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like World War II is almost like written by a Shakespeare or something,
Illuminati confirmed.
J.R.R. Tolkien, Illuminati.
Oh my gosh.
Wee, 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 wee.
Man, well, I think
I feel enlightened.
Yeah, I feel like we've reached Harry. We've reached the top.
All right. What do you think? You think that's a good wrap up for that one?
I think that's good.
All right. Well, don't forget, guys. I don't know why I always say it. We got both kinds here.
Heavy and Western.